Hi, everyone. Good morning for those of you where it's morning, and good day, good afternoon, good night for those of you where it's somewhere else. I'm so excited to be here today, and thank you all for coming. So, the topic of this presentation is listening to anger and guilt, finding the wisdom and meaning in difficult emotions. And before we get into that, I wanted to share that my background relevant to this topic. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I'm a psychotherapist in private practice. And I also am a longtime person on a spiritual path and on a healing journey. I also have experience as a holistic health practitioner. So that's really what informs this talk today. I did want to give two disclaimers. So first of all, anything that I share here is not medical advice. It's not psychiatric, psychological advice, right? This isn't treatment of any kind. This is just for informational and educational purposes only. And the second thing I wanted to say, as you may have just heard, is that I live in a very loud neighborhood in San Francisco. And I do the best that I can with that, but it just is what it is. So there may be some ambient noise joining us today. All right. So also, I did want to say, as you can see up here, everything that I'm talking about in my presentation today is part of my new book, Worthy as You Are, which is a tool, a manual for healing and well-being, psychological healing and well-being, that integrates cognitive behavioral therapy with spiritual practice. And the reason for that is because of how much that's benefited me. And I talk about that more in the book. And also, I have another book from Llewellyn that came out in 2020 called The Little Work, which is a manual for deepening in spiritual practice and bringing spirituality into our everyday lives. And if I were to describe the primary difference between the two of them, the little work really is mostly about deepening in spiritual practice, and Worthy as You Are is, I like to say, it's like a love letter to the inner children within all of us. It's about healing. It's about liberating ourselves from unhealthy conditioning that we've grown up that's taught us that we're less than, not worthy enough, not lovable enough, and ways to let that go. All right, so today's topic is finding the wisdom and meaning in difficult emotions. So first of all, what are difficult emotions? The simplest way that I know of to define that is just to say a difficult emotion is an emotion that feels difficult to you. So it's not necessarily going to be the same for everyone. For some people, happiness is actually a difficult emotion, often because of trauma or other negative experiences they've been through in their lives. So that's the main way that I look at it. But having said that, for most people, anger, guilt, grief, these are emotions that we find uncomfortable or challenging to navigate. And so part of the reason for exploring them is that in my experience, there are ways of having a healthy relationship with these emotions, which then enable us to integrate them into our lives in a profound way and in a way that helps us move in the direction of increased well-being overall and a greater sense of spiritual connection, alignment, and embodiment in our everyday lives. So why is this an issue? Why do we even need to talk about difficult emotions? One reason is that there's often what I would call a conventional lack of insight into them, which is to say that many, if not most of us, don't grow up around role models and information that teach us, oh, here's a healthy relationship with anger. Here's a healthy relationship with guilt. Here's a healthy relationship with grief. I mean, some people do, but very often it's not that way at all. And when we're just sort of put into the world and not taught about what we feel, and sometimes even shamed for having emotions. I mean, I can say as a child who was very, very sensitive, I was shamed all the time for crying and expressing difficult things. And I don't even just mean in my family, I mean in my community. So We don't necessarily know what to do with them because of conventional wisdom. And sometimes we're even not taught that emotions have any value at all. And then the second reason, which I'm going to explore a little bit more, is because of something that is called spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing, the way that I define it, is the denial or avoidance of natural elements of the human experience in the name of spirituality, or anytime we use spirituality to avoid or deny our circumstances. So the reason why this is relevant is because there are some spiritual teachings and spiritual teachers that specifically will say denigrating things about difficult emotions. And there's our wonderful motorcycle joining us today for the video. But they will say things about difficult emotions, like that imply or outright say, well, a truly spiritually realized person isn't going to feel anger because your inner contentment is going to keep you from feeling that. In cognitive behavioral therapy, the main way that emotions are conceptualized is that they follow our thoughts. So if I feel angry, it's because I believed something. I interpreted reality in a way that led to me feeling angry about it. And that's a very extreme position. I don't hold it to that extreme degree, but some people do. And you also see that in some spiritual traditions, right? Where there's this idea of if you just do enough inner work, then you're not going to feel anger anymore, because why would you? You would move beyond it. And the same is true of guilt, and the same is true of grief. People say these things. Some of the other things, there's no value in feeling negatively. We should only feel positively all the time. We should run away from anything we feel that's not positive, because it's going to lower our vibration. It's going to tank our manifestations. And again, this just denies the reality of the human experience, because it is human to feel anger. It is human to feel grief. It is human to feel guilt. That's just part of life. And the thing is, when we push those feelings away, when we reject them, it's very hard to have a healthy relationship with them. Now, I'm not saying we can't have a toxic relationship with difficult emotions, because we absolutely can. And we can pour gasoline on the fire of them, exacerbating them well beyond where they need to go. And I talk about that a lot in my new book. In fact, section 3 of my new book is specifically on navigating life's difficulties, some of them in a spiritually aligned way that integrates that with cognitive behavioral therapy. But there's also this healthy place that we can go with our emotions. There's a healthy state where we can have the difficult emotion without denying it, and also without it sort of completely derailing us, and actually moving deeper within ourselves, within our experience of being human, through owning it in a healthy manner. So I just wanted to say again, part of the reason why spiritual bypassing can be such an issue is that, for example, if I'm taught that I should never feel angry, then I can erode over time my coping, my ability to cope with anger. And I've seen that happen. People who have been taught, and so there's no shame when we come from a place of spiritual bypassing, because that's something that we're taught, right? People teach us these things, we believe them, and then we can end up in these awful relationships with our emotions. So my ability to cope with anger, if I think anger is beneath me, I shouldn't feel anger, I should just push it away, then my ability to cope with anger can erode alongside that. And all of a sudden, one day, I become very, very triggered by something in my environment, and I have no capacity to deal with it, because I've pushed my anger aside for so long. I should only think positive. I should only be grateful. That now it's here and I don't know what to do. Or maybe I'm not as able to be present to my friends who are suffering in their lives because I have judgment about suffering. I have judgment about guilt, or I have judgment about grief as being something I shouldn't feel because it's not spiritual. Right. So this is some of the stuff that can happen when we fall into spiritual bypassing. And that's why it's so important, I think, to recognize it for what it is, and then learn these healthier ways of dealing with emotion and just meeting them head on. And there are a lot of tips that I share about that in my book, including mindfulness practice and breathing exercises and relaxation. But one of the main ones that I'm going to explore today is introspection. So when I say finding the wisdom and meaning in difficult emotions, most of what I mean by that is listening to them. What is this emotion saying to me? What is at the core of it, right? What's going on inside what I'm feeling? Where is it coming from? So I'm going to start with guilt. And one thing I do with guilt, first of all, is differentiate between guilt and shame. And this actually extends from the work of Brene Brown. So Brene Brown, who is a researcher, talks a lot about how guilt is when we feel bad because usually we did something or we thought about doing something or someone we're connected with did something that doesn't resonate with us, that we don't feel good about, and we feel bad because of that. And shame is I'm bad. So guilt, I feel bad that I did that. Shame, I'm bad that I did that. And in my work and hers, shame is actually an emotion that we challenge. And there's many reasons for that. But the two fundamental ones are that it misrepresents what we are, and there's nowhere to go from it. So I'll give you an example. So for example, let's say I feel shame about having mental illness. And in my work, I'm very open about the fact that as a child, I had mental illness and I went through a lot of traumatic experiences in my adolescence that gave me new symptoms and exacerbated what was already there. So if I just feel shame about having mental illness, if mental illness is just me being broken, then that separates me from experiencing the greater depth and the greater truth of what I am and what all of us are, which I've experienced in spiritual practice, which is that we're holy, sacred beings. All of us are holy, sacred beings, right? So, and that's another reason why I wrote the new book, is because I want to the degree that I can, help people experience that within themselves. So if I believe the story of shame, that I'm broken, that I can't ever be good enough, then I'm separating myself mentally from what I can know is true deeper within. So we challenge shame. We challenge shame because also usually what brings us into positions where we feel shame is external factors, external conditioning. The other reason of challenging shame, aside from our own divinity and recognizing that, is it's very defeatist. You know, if I feel like I'm just broken, I can never develop relationship skills, it's going to be very hard for me to develop them because I believe that I can't do it. But if I believe instead, oh, well, I don't have those skills, but maybe I can develop them, maybe it's possible, then there's somewhere for me to go, somewhere I can go with that. So that is an important, that's the reason why in my work we challenge shame. We meet it with compassion, but we don't leave it where it is. Now, guilt is different. Guilt, when it's healthy, the way that I would define that is being the voice of our conscience. Guilt is a part of us that tells us that we did something or we thought about doing something or someone we're associated with did something, like I said earlier, that that doesn't align with our values. And that feels bad. That's healthy guilt. Now, the reason why I'm saying healthy guilt is because there's also unhealthy guilt. And unhealthy guilt often comes from our experience with other people, from things that we were told we shouldn't do, things that we were told are bad that may not be bad. So, for example, if I was told growing up that I shouldn't stand up for myself, when I stand up for myself as an adult, I may feel both guilt and shame. But I want to challenge that because it's healthy to stand up for myself. It's healthy for us to stand up for ourselves. So one of the ways of working with guilt is when we feel guilty, introspecting into it, because guilt extends from shoulds. There's always going to be at least one should in guilt. And sometimes there are many shoulds. Sometimes there are layers of shoulds. So we can look at what they are. What are the shoulds? I feel guilty because I shouldn't stand up for myself. I feel guilty because I should do this. And then if you can write them out and look at them with a compassionate lens. I'm a human being I get to make mistakes. I deserve self-respect. I'm a divine being like everyone else. I deserve to stand up for myself. So am I going to leave this should, or am I going to question this should? And the answer is, I'm going to question this should. And yes, as somebody's saying in the chat, if we have guilt because of religion, religious beliefs that we don't even believe anymore, I shouldn't have this kind of sexual desire because of this religious belief, then we question that should. Well, I don't even believe that. So what happens when we list out our shoulds is we see the ones that resonate with our values and the ones that don't. And we challenge the ones that don't. We recognize them and say, you know what? I get why I feel guilty here, and I'm not owning that should anymore. I'm meeting myself with compassion and affirming what I know is true instead, which is that it's totally healthy for me to stand up for myself. It's an act of self-respect. It's an act of self-love. So guilt, we look at the shoulds. Are they healthy or not? And we challenge the ones that come from other people that don't line up with our values. And then we set intentions for the ones that do, because should can be a very toxic word. It can lead to a lot of very oppressive standards for ourselves. So I like to shift it to intent. Okay, well, I do intend to treat people with respect. So if I didn't treat people with respect and I felt like I shouldn't have done that, I'm going to say, moving forward, yes, I intend to treat people with respect. I listen to the message of this guilt, I receive it, and I'm moving forward. Moving forward in a way where it's okay that I felt that guilt. In fact, thank you for this guilt because it showed me that I deviated from my values. But that's a healthy guilt and a healthy relationship with guilt. We don't want to beat ourselves up forever either. That's the other side, is that listening to the guilt, learning from the guilt, figuring out what to do. Am I making amends? What's going on here? And moving forward. Because once we've taken the message, it's like, what's the point? If we are going to change our behavior and we are going to make amends, sitting in it over and over and over and over and over again isn't getting us anywhere. So compassionate thinking. It's understandable that I did that. I was doing the best that I could in that moment. I've learned from that experience. I'm moving forward. Next, anger. Okay, so anger can, of course, as I'm sure most of us know, become very toxic when it's not met with understanding. And one of the first things that I often do with people in therapy is work on getting themselves out of a situation, relaxation exercises, mindfulness exercises, self-soothing, becoming able to do that as step one so that we're not having anger be as much of a sort of toxic element in our lives. But what is anger about? Anger means there was an unmet desire, an unmet want or need. We wanted something to we wanted to have something happen. It didn't happen that way. And now we feel angry. And there can be layers of anger too. It's not always just about the surface. And often when we feel a disproportionate level of anger than what seems to be called for by a situation, it's because of these layers of desire. So the first thing with anger, after we've gotten out of the situation, after we've calmed ourselves down, is to look at what are the unmet desires? What did we want to have happen that didn't happen? Well, I wanted my partner to text me that they were going to be late. So I feel disrespected. Okay, unmet desire one, totally reasonable. Maybe beneath that, there's a deeper desire. And you know what? I feel disrespected a lot in this relationship. Unmet desire too. And then deeper still might be, I want to feel respected in general. Most of my life, I felt disrespected. And I'm furious about it. Unmet desire 3. So we look at the layers. What's going on inside that anger? What is causing it? And then when we have that information, we can do something with it. We can advocate for ourselves. You know, I feel disrespected by this behavior, and I want you to understand as my partner why that's important to me, which is very different from when we just go with the anger into the realm of like, oh, you're such a rude jerk. Oh, you're so awful. I can't believe this person did this to me, which of course, sure, you can feel that. And what about that? What's the unmet desire? What are the unmet wants and needs? And of course, our needs are always important to advocate for if we can. Sometimes we're not able to meet them, but they're always valuable, their needs. And then our wants, we look at them. Sometimes we might compromise and sometimes we might not, but it's good to know what they are. And then the other piece of this too is that sometimes our wants are not reasonable. If I'm angry at my partner because he doesn't want to spend all of his time with me, I need to look at that. Is it really bad that my partner doesn't want to spend all of his time with me? Is that really fair? No, that's not me being fair, right? That's me being angry about something where I'm actually being a little bit immature. So it's good to see that too, because now I can meet that with compassionate thinking. What in my life brought me to a place where I felt like my partner can't go out for an evening with his friends without me? And can I comfort that part of myself? Can I meet it with understanding? And can I affirm thoughts to help move forward with that, about how it's okay for my partner to go out with his friends? That doesn't mean he loves me any less. That doesn't mean he's not committed to me. That doesn't mean he's abandoning me like maybe someone did in the past. Right? So we meet anger with understanding. We meet guilt with understanding. And all of this I explore more in the book, Worthy as You Are. So that's it for today, except now we're going to move on to questions. And, I did want to say, so steps with anger, self-soothe is number 1. 2 is introspect. 3 is discern, right? Okay, what am I going to do about this? And then 4 is act. All right, so now we're going to move on to questions for the next 8 minutes. Okay, so let's see, hold on. All right. Okay, so Amy asked a question about emotions in primary. Can you clarify what you mean by that? How do you incorporate shadow work? Okay, so shadow work, it's important to so shadow work is a bigger topic than sort of like a, soundbitey, really quick answer to a question. But it's really important to look at the shadow, the parts of us that are unseen, and know what's in there. And I do incorporate that in my new book. But really, it's about making a habit of introspection and also thinking about what has happened in the past. What are the experiences that we've survived? And looking at how that might influence our psychology today. So when we introspect into an emotion and figure out what's going on, that takes us into the shadow, if we dive deep into it. Okay, so hold on. There was another one under this. What about when you are angry at the world, something that you can't control? Well, first of all, you definitely recognize it. Recognizing, yes, I'm angry because I'm so mad that the government isn't doing this, or I'm so mad that this is happening in society. And then offer yourself compassion about it. It's understandable that I would feel that way. Absolutely. And then what I do personally, and everybody has their own approaches to these kinds of things, is look at my own power. Where do I have power? And where do I feel like because of that power, I have a sense of responsibility to act? But also within all of that, we can only do the best we can. We can only act with the power that we have. And sometimes that sucks, right? Because we can't do things that we want to be able to do to help others in ways that seem clearly beneficial. We can only do our best. We can only ever do our best with the power that we have. So compassionate thinking. Compassionate thinking is honestly kind of my biggest thing, period. But that's what I would say to that. Okay, so hold on. Where is the next question? Oh, the book is coming out September 8th. Okay. Wait. Is your book easily read by preteen level? I would say no. I talk a lot about things that I would say it's adults. It's for adults. How what brought me to this work, my own experiences of trauma growing up, of mental illness, of abuse, and going on a healing journey. And then as a result of my own experience and my healing journey, I also then became a therapist because I wanted to share all of what I had experienced with others. The thing with the chat is it keeps like moving down. Oh, do you think shame has a helpful purpose? That's a really difficult question. So I think guilt has a helpful purpose. And I think that guilt and shame can stem off from each other. But I would say that shame in and of itself, if it takes you to a place of I'm fundamentally broken and awful, then I don't see that as helpful. If it brings you to a place of honesty within yourself about your behavior, maybe that could have a benefit. But again, like such a core part of where I'm coming from is moving into our own divinity. And I think that, most of us are alienated from that. So the world would look very different, in my opinion, if a critical mass of people really connected with the divinity within and even knew that that was there and even knew what that was. I mean, so many of us have been taught that we even can't do that. Either it's not real or we can't do it. So that's what I would say about that. So do you distinguish between belief and internalization, especially regarding early life traumas? Okay, so I'm not totally sure I understand exactly what you mean by that question, but I would say that I distinguish between conscious belief and subconscious belief. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, we often call these core beliefs. So through our experiences of trauma, we tend to develop core beliefs about ourselves, life, and the world. And if they're extending from trauma, they're often very negative. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. People are always going to let me down. I can't trust anyone. And we may not consciously believe any of that, but it's there operating on a subconscious level. So that's what I look at, is I look at our conscious thoughts, our conscious beliefs, and our subconscious beliefs. And part of the point of introspecting into our emotions is to recognize our subconscious beliefs. Because when we see them, we can say, oh, wow, I really believe that anyone who I enter into a relationship is going to abandon me. So let me address that. Maybe go to therapy to deal with that, do some affirmations about that, do some inner child work about that, do some workbooks about that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, but not when we don't know it's there. So that's what I would say to that. Okay, when your anger fuse is lit, how can you calm yourself down quickly? So I am a big believer in making a regular practice of relaxation exercises, a regular practice of mindfulness, a regular practice of introspection, a regular practice of self-soothing, so that you've got that all under your belt for when it comes in. And then training yourself to first leave the room and then do all of those things. Okay, I'm gonna look for this. Okay. Yes, self-advocacy is for sure hard to do. And this is part of why it's just so important, again, to look at all of the beliefs that are in us, which again, we can find by introspecting into what we feel usually, most of them. And then just what are they? What reality is created by them? And what do we want to believe now? What do we want to believe now? I call this process inner gardening. We weed out the beliefs that are in our subconscious mind that are not serving our well-being, that don't match our adult now. And we plant in their place, we affirm beliefs that do, compassionate beliefs. So when I talk about affirmations, and I'm going to end with this because this is the last minute, I don't mean the super out there ones that are conventionally popular most of the time. I mean things like, it's okay for me to need help. It's healthy for me to stand up for myself. I deserve to have healthy relationships, and so does everyone else. I can improve my relationship skills if I work on them. That's what I mean by affirmations. And in my experience, when we affirm things like that, alongside a general practice of compassionate thinking and weeding unsupportive beliefs, it can dramatically transform our experience of well-being. And that's what this lovely book is about, coming out September 8th. All right, so, okay, wait, I will do this. What are some good self-soothing statements? It's understandable that I feel this way. Emotions pass. I can breathe into this emotion. I can accept this emotion. I can focus on my body. I don't have to act right now. I don't have to act with this feeling. I can just be with this feeling. I can witness this feeling. As I witness this feeling, as I breathe deeply, as I don't feed it with lots of thoughts to the degree that I can, I will start to feel better. I am treating myself like my own best friend. I'm meeting myself with compassion. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so glad that you were able to join today. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening, wherever you are. And thanks again so much. All right, take care, everyone.